Member Wyrick?
Here.
Member Owens? Member Cleister?
Here.
Member Stroya?
Here.
Member Warren?
Here.
Member Atheny?
Here.
Member Orr?
Here.
6 present.
Okay, let's kick it off with ordinance rules.
Do we need a motion to excuse Melissa?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Make a motion to excuse Melissa.
Troy, seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now we'll go to ordinance rules. Dave, yep, I'm up for that.
So this is chapter 107, mobile food units. And if you recall, I believe it was about a year ago where we passed registration, inspections, and other fees. And this is a removal of the $25 inspection fee. I think, Ben, you might have some more to add to that.
I do.
Thank you.
So you are correct, about a year ago, 2024 was the first full year of having this in place. And so prior to the enactment of this ordinance, you were required by fire code, if you had a food truck, to get inspected before operating in each jurisdiction you operated in, but North Canton didn't have a formal process to make that happen. So we created, it's called the MFU permit, mobile food unit. And with that, we added a $25 fee, as most permits do. We have had great success with the flexibility of the inspections and you just pick whatever time works for you and you come to the fire department and the inspector on duty does your inspection. What we have not had great success with is the fee. And it is honestly causing a higher level of non-compliance to have the fee than we think to not have the fee. And why I say that is, we have people who, they're only gonna come for Main Street Festival. And so they're not really familiar with our city, they're definitely not registered ahead of time. And so then we get into an issue where they show up at Main Street Festival and our fire department comes and says, where's your decal that says you've been inspected this year? And, oh, I haven't been inspected yet. Okay, $25, please. If not, I'm gonna make you leave. Similarly, we have, food trucks that operate in the city that just don't wanna pay the fee, and so they operate as long as they can until they get caught by a police officer, and then they get told to pay the fee. So really, we don't incur additional costs for these inspections. So if they do it during normal work hours, like we want them to, while the inspector's on duty, we're paying them anyway. We're not incurring a cost for the permit fee. Similarly, for the big events, Main Street Festival and the like, we always have a fire inspector on duty for those events because there's lots of generators and gas burning things and electric plugged into places electric is not normally plugged into. So again, the inspector's there already. What is more important for public safety is that these food trucks, particularly those that use liquefied natural gas or lots of cooking oil, get inspected so that we know they're not gonna spontaneously combust in the middle of Main Street Festival. So in order to hopefully increase compliance with the actual health and safety portion, we're asking that council eliminate the $25 fee. And just because I anticipate somebody asking me, in 2024, that was $1,300 in revenue.
Does the Stark County Health Department still come and inspect? Because I've seen them at the fair and I thought I'd seen them at Main Street Festival for the food truck.
Yeah, so if you serve food anywhere in Stark County Health District jurisdiction, which is essentially everywhere but the city of Canton, you have to have a food vendor's license from the health district. They do like to drop in at Main Street Festival because they know it's a large event with a lot of food trucks. They typically don't do random checks at like the farmer's market every week or Market 720 this weekend. I don't think they showed up and did a random check, but almost every Main Street Festival with certainty they show up and do random checks.
Do we still charge a fee for them for, didn't about the same time last year for the parks?
Yes, so we would keep the fee to operate in a city park, but not to operate on public streets.
So I like the idea of removing the fee.
Mhm.
They're small businesses, they're facing a lot of increased costs. But will we still be able to maintain the fact that it's important that they get inspection, or will they see it as no value and not opt for an inspection?
I will tell you that the people who feel that way are the people who are attempting to dodge the fee now. And so we are hopeful that by saying to them, it is free, they will be more likely to let us in and conduct the inspection and not have to kick somebody out of Main Street Festival like we had to 2 years ago.
Well, and I think that that responsibility kind of goes to the nonprofit putting on the event, right? I mean, I know, the library in my other role, we organize the summer series and have food trucks every week. And I spent a lot of time coordinating with Danielle, like, did this truck come and get inspected? Did they pay their fee? And it would be much easier for me in that role to say, go get inspected, not thank you for coming, because it's really competitive to get the good trucks. So having to tell them, okay, thank you for coming, now you have to pay this fee, it would just be easier, I think, to have just the inspection. But the nonprofit, to Dave's point, should be making sure that they're all inspected and aware that they need that.
And we heard similar stories from the farmer's market of, trying to get a food truck to come to the farmer's market to help make it better. And then I have to tell them, by the way, thank you for agreeing to come. Please go see the city and pay a $25 fee.
Mm-hmm.
They make money.
They do.
They make money. And if we sell the idea of a $25, which is nothing, it's a positive. For only $25, we do this.
The idea is
One thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think if the goal is public safety, not making money, I think we ought to just see what happens if we remove the fee. Does that improve compliance? Does not improve compliance. And to Dave's point, we're helping small businesses at the same time, so.
And they make money if people put on a good event. I mean, they're taking a risk every time they come out, honestly, purchasing all that product. And and it's just $25, but still, it's.
What do other communities do?
Some have fees, some don't. It really depends on who they are and how they structure their system, I guess. It also, communities that tend to have higher volumes of food trucks tend to have fees. Communities that tend to have lower volumes or only have food trucks for a festival or a fair or some sort of limited event tend not to have fees.
When did this take effect for the first time, this ordinance?
23.
23, okay. So maybe it's just people being unfamiliar with the process to begin with.
Some of it was definitely that, I
Right,
will admit,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to try whatever you guys think people are gonna comply with.
I believe we are asking if this is passed to take effect January. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, just because we've had 27 people register and pay their fee already this year.
Okay.
And it would be a little unfair to them to say, everybody who registers now in the second half of the year doesn't have to pay the fee.
Yeah.
And do they have to each time? So if they come back, food trucks, 2 different events, is it it's just a one time?
Once a year.
Okay.
you really want to make an impact, rebate them their $25 and say council decided to remove that fee and we're refunding you.
That would be up to the 7 of you to authorize refunding them their
If
money.
you want to become a community friendly and food truck friendly and drive people this direction, you want to get those bigger trucks, that says a lot for a very little bit of money.
That'd be $675.
How much?
$675 is what we would be refunding.
When would we do that? Just when they show up to their first event, give it to them?
It's all through our
Okay.
online portal, so
Why not do that? I think
Yeah.
that's a
I
good
agree.
question.
we'd do it on the effective date of the ordinance.
especially because nonprofits have been told that this isn't going to be in place this summer. And so I know the library has not told its food truck vendors that they're gonna have to pay this fee. I'm guessing that the chamber hasn't
Well,
told
if we
theirs
think it's gonna
either.
help with compliance too,
Yeah.
then let's just do it now and rebate that money, $675. Let's do it.
Is it easy for you to do it, or is it a time?
Oh, yeah, it is. I didn't suggest it because that's not my call, that's
Yeah, yeah.
your call.
I'm just looking at it to be business friendly, and if we've got another half of the season and the whole summer's here,
Mhm.
let's make
Makes sense.
it's like make a statement.
Yeah. If Canton is open for food trucks. As long as you're inspected. Right. And have a free sticker.
Well, can, make the adjustments for the effective date?
I would just recommend that whoever makes a motion, include in your motion that before it comes to council on June, I don't remember, the second week of June, it be amended to make the effective date the earliest possible and to include rebating fees already paid in 25.
I'll make that motion to include the caveat that Ben just suggested.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
This council agenda. Yeah, is that in for your motion?
Go ahead and do that as a separate
Yeah.
one, since you didn't explicitly state it.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to move the whole council.
Yeah,
Second.
no, that's
All
why I
in
said.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Street and alley, John.
Okay. We're talking about the parking situation on the street. The administration's gonna lead the discussion and that's pretty much what I had to say because it's a big thing.
It is a big thing. So I meet on a bi-weekly basis with a group of our police officers about, things that are affecting them and their department. And shortly after we started this group, they asked me if administration would be open to bringing to the seven of you a conversation about revisiting the city's overnight parking prohibition. And at that time, I had asked them, can we wait till after issue 4 passes and, we've moved on to whatever the next thing is. And they agreed, and so I'm here tonight keeping the promise that we told the police department that we would bring this up to the seven of you to potentially revisit the overnight parking ordinance. So Randy, our new public safety analyst, was tasked to do some digging for us on how did this policy come to be, what is it, and what would a different version look like. So just for a refresher for everyone, on most city streets, unless marked with a sign or you're in violation of some other code, so in front of a fire hydrant or too close to an intersection, for 20 hours a day, you are allowed to park on that street. For 4 hours, from 2 a.m. to 6 p.m., you are not allowed to park on that street. Randy,
And 6 a.m.
6 a.m., what did I say?
PM.
No, 6 a.m., sorry. Randy went reading through the old council minute books and discovered that this was originally enacted for street sweeping. So at the time we bought a street sweeper, we decided that we were gonna do it at night, and therefore the streets had to be clear at night. We have since stopped sweeping the streets at night, probably, I would guess, for overtime reasons. And so we don't really have this need for clear streets like we did. So we asked Randy to look at, so what would a different alternative look like? Because we don't want the streets to become, covered with abandoned cars. And so policy that he found from other communities and that the police department seemed to like, and I'll let Frank comment after I'm done, I promise. Chief Kemp, sorry, is a 72-hour rule. So if a car is parked on the street, it must not be there longer than 72 hours. And so what that means in practice is for most people, if you leave during the day to go to high school or work, you're gonna be just fine. You're perfectly compliant, the car moves every day. But if you abandon a vehicle, obviously you're not gonna be compliant, because the car's not gonna move. And so, the suggestion is for a pretty aggressive, after 48 hours after you get a ticket, the vehicle will be towed off the street. So if you violate the 72 hours and you get a ticket, 48 hours later, we're taking the car if it hasn't moved and the ticket hasn't been paid. Now, that doesn't solve all of the potential parking problems because, you know, in some neighborhoods, we have some very narrow streets. And so we have two options for you all if you are interested in revising this ordinance. And so option one would be just a general blanket city rule to try and address those narrow streets. So we would say something like, on all city streets, parking on the fire hydrant side of the street is prohibited. Just a blanket rule, not taking into account what the street looks like, its width, how much traffic it has. Option two is to conduct a street inventory and establish specific rules based on street width or street type. So for instance, we might say, no matter what, you are never allowed to park on West Maple Street because it's a main thoroughfare. Or we might say, if your street is narrower than 30 feet, parking is prohibited on the fire hydrant side of the street. Most of the streets that are narrower than that are already prohibited on the fire hydrant side and already have signage to that effect. It really only applies to the sort of old village neighborhoods, primarily in wards 3 and 1. As always, we would continue to reserve the right to ban parking during snow events, flood events, or other hazard or temporary conditions. For example, for the 4th of July, we traditionally prohibited parking on 7th and Wise. And then really all we're looking for tonight is, you know, is council open to continuing this conversation for us to proceed, or do you just not want to keep going? So I will punt over to Chief Kemp now if he has something he wants to add.
Thank you, Ben. That was a pretty good background on that. Let's start off with, this is a change in my prior opinion on the overnight parking. For many years, it was considered to be also a resource for investigative tools because we get cars in neighborhoods, we document cars that were parked in neighborhoods, and we went back to those lists for some investigations if things happen overnight. Now with the advent of some of the newer technologies, we have received more benefit from the technologies that we have in place. Through some of the license plate reader cameras that are around town that give us much more actionable information for that. The other thing that my guys on that have pointed out is that in town we have, with the changes in the structures of families, children are staying home longer. Households are having 3 or 4 drivers within the household. In some of the older neighborhoods, like that's been pointed out, 1 and 3, those driveways maybe hold 2 cars at best. So they're squeezing a 3rd car somewhere on the side, possibly partially parking in the yard, sometimes completely parking in the yard, which creates yet another event for another violation. So these cars that are parking in these driveways can't get completely in, they're blocking the sidewalks, forcing pedestrians to have to walk out into the roadway to go around the cars that are blocking the sidewalk. If we think back to when we went through COVID, we went through a hiatus on issuing parking tickets. As I recollect that time frame, I don't think we had a huge problem with cars that had parked on the roadway because we did have an awful lot of college students that came home, and if you had a household that had 2 or 3 kids in college and they came home, mom and dad parked in the driveway, you had a couple extra cars parked on the road. It wasn't a problem with that. To add a little bit of clarification to what Ben said about making sure that we still try to keep a handle on things with the 72-hour limit. And how we would monitor that, that would be 72 hours based on complaint. If a neighbor calls and tells us, hey, the car's been parked here for 72 hours, it hasn't moved. We would then go in and do much like what we do with abandoned vehicles on private property. We would mark the ground next to the tires. And then we would come back in 72 hours from that time point to confirm that the car had not moved. So it would be a little bit longer than the 72-hour complaint, or in some neighborhoods, unless it catches our attention for some odd reason, some neighbors may not be bothered by a car sitting there, so it could go longer because nobody's called to complain to us about it. But it gives the neighbors some latitude and some ownership within their neighborhoods on this. As Ben said, the width of the streets, let me give you an example. The width of the streets and some of the conversations we had about that was a 40-foot right of way on a street, like Ward 1 or 3, and some of the other ones. In a 40-foot right of way, according to Rob, we have 24 foot from curb to curb. An average car is about 6 foot wide. Add that they can park up to 12 inches from the curb. Now they've taken 7 feet out of that roadway, so you have 17 feet left for traffic to be able to pass by. So when we start getting down to that narrow width, and a fire truck or an ambulance could be up to 10 feet wide, maybe a little wider. One side of the street. And the fire hydrant just seems to be the most sensible side of the street. Do you have any questions about that?
I do. Any given night, last night, maybe you don't know last night, any given night, how many cars do you estimate are parked on the street illegally now, which would be illegally now between 2 and 6?
It really, I mean, weekdays, it's not that many. Weekends, it just depends on if they have family, friends and stuff like that over, if they forgot to call in.
Yeah.
I had construction in my driveway.
Right.
Didn't the cop see that I had construction going on in my driveway? I forgot to call in. You should have just exempted me.
Okay. Ballpark.
We did about 260 parking tickets last year.
So really, and if we're gonna divide that by 365 days,
One a night.
okay, that's less generous than what I was told by an officer earlier today. I was told maybe 10, maybe they're not all getting tickets, but I guess my question is this a solution looking for a problem? Like, I'm of the belief that, is it really broke, or are we trying to think that this is broke so we can fix it?
Well, I can tell you, we haven't taken zero tolerance on parking over sidewalks. And as I have family that lives in Ward 3,
Mm-hmm.
I listen to my wife vent all the time about cars that are parked over sidewalks.
Yep.
Because they can't get fully into the driveway.
Yeah.
And if we did start, it would become a very contentious issue if we would start issuing tickets for every car that's parked partially over the sidewalk, because that is blocking the sidewalk, that is causing children to have to walk out around.
Well, and we're not really supposed to let people park in the yards either.
We're
So
not supposed to
what
let people
would
park
that
in the
be?
street.
do you let it tire? Do you let it go to the door? Like how far? And if we started doing that,
We did that, but we switched to based upon complaint only,
right?
because that was contentious when we were driving around the city.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think about the people too that call,
previously.
I had one of those neighborhoods that they were fixing their house, and we encourage people to fix their houses, right? And we want that to happen. The dumpster was in the garage, in the driveway. They didn't see it. So she called the first time and was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what's the time element that your people had to spend on that? Which I think they were then told, well, I need to talk to the chief, but, I need to talk to the chief. So then it gets another one we're talking about. Then she didn't pay it, and it was another $25. So then she called again. So then they had to talk to you or to someone or Catherine, and then, okay, well, you just pay the $25, not the other one. And what's the time that it's taking for these silly conversations?
Yeah, but it was, I'm sorry.
It's just a contentious subject.
Yeah, it is.
We get more bad publicity and actually
confrontational conversations from parking tickets than we do when we're out there issuing speeding tickets or stop sign tickets, things like that.
I
Yeah.
would like to correct myself because Stephanie, you saying 25 made me realize I just did math wrong. It's about 520 tickets a year, not 260. So that's
Okay,
one and a
so-
half a night.
1.5. Yeah, but my comment still remains the same. I just feel like 1.5 a night, I mean, is that really an egregious problem? I guess I just see negatives to allowing this. I'm appreciative that you guys have looked at the 72 hour notion, but to hear that's just on complaint,
Then
it
would,
won't be 72 hours, it'll
would
be
you come
longer.
up with a solid set of rules from council of
Yeah.
what we give permission to, what we don't give permission? Because that's the other part is my guys expressing to me, trying to be consistent with people. How many times do I give somebody permission? Their mother-in-law is in between houses and their mother-in-law is gonna be living with them for 3 months. Do I permit her 3 months permission to park in the roadway? But if 2 houses down, his excuse isn't as good as that, and I tell him he can only get permission twice a year for parking in the street. You know, we're trying to be as fair as we can when we do this, but there is some subjectiveness to it. And I will tell you that my night shift guys, if they've taken the time to drive by and see a car twice at night, the last thing they want to see is one of us going a ticket on them.
Right.
And we do have a process in place that somebody is not aware of it, having not been previously warned. We will give them one time relief from a parking ticket.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I have some that if it was not written in error, they will not void the parking ticket. So usually they rise to the level of administrative review, typically by the administrative sergeant. Takes a look at it and then he turns it down, they still want to appeal it, they talk to me, and then they can go a step above that. But it's very hard when my guys are out there doing a job, and I think I was the one that struck the balance, and my guys still weren't completely happy with me. I struck the balance with, okay, you forgot to call in. I will not void my officer's ticket because I respect their work too much, but I will give you the compromise of not charging you the additional $25 and making it a $50 fine. It costs me no extra one way or the other, whether you just pay the 25 or the penalty with the extra 25, because you took the time to talk to me, you took the time to talk to your
Well, and on this street, you never would have had an issue. There could have been enough parking on both sides. So here, she was penalized.
Wouldn't have been.
No, there was nothing. So I feel like it's kind of an old school, punishment for a lot of, our residents now. Especially when you said that we're not street sweeping. It's old school though.
But it's also an aesthetic thing too, so you know what, I mean, well, my daughter, a 20-year-old Volvo with 129,000 miles on it for 72 hours, I could park it over in Monticello. I mean, it's not like you're okay with it, so I mean, I guess I could bring it over there and park it for 72 hours. I mean, my point is I think it's an aesthetic thing, as well.
But I don't
I
think you're
mean,
gonna have.
I've had neighbors that, around the corner, I'm assuming, I don't know the gentleman, but I'm assuming that he's in construction. Every once in a while, he's got a construction trailer sitting on the side of the road. So now are we gonna have construction equipment? Are we gonna have RVs? Are we gonna have campers, boats? You know, I remember when I was a kid, we had 2 cars in the garage, older cars.
Weren't you lucky?
I had my dad had a speedboat, and with their 2 cars in the driveway, it was okay. But as I started driving, now we've got 4 cars in the driveway. When my sister started driving, we now had 5 vehicles in the driveway in the summertime, and we didn't park on the street. They found a place for the boat.
You had a double, parking garage. You had a 2-car driveway.
Correct,
We'll drive around. A lot of places don't have that.
right.
I mean,
Well, what I'm
across the
saying
street
is
they don't have it.
we exceeded the amount of vehicles in the driveway, and we found a solution. I guess
Because
solution
you
wasn't
had a
putting it
2-car
on-
garage and a
Wow.
2-car entrance.
You know,
I think
guess
the
I'm
people
just
that we're trying
curious.
to accommodate are those smaller areas. And,
And I would appreciate to hear from them as well. I mean, I think
they do hear from them.
okay, I mean, I think based on when we talked about this before, the residents that I talked to were not necessarily in favor of this. There were one or two that were, but the majority of the ones that I talked to, this is back when we were talking about doing the permit thing, what was this, back 2 years ago, something like that? They were not in favor. I'd be happy to talk, hear from my constituents that want to see that, because I know that largely it's going to affect my neighborhood. It's not gonna affect your neighborhood. You guys got big driveways over there. It's gonna be my neighborhood. It's gonna be my neighbors that have to look at these cars parked on the street. And I think that it is going to create I'm sorry?
It's the biggest, they pay good property tax. I mean,
don't
we
think the
balance
property tax has
everybody.
anything to
But
do with
Jamie,
it.
it's not about the big or the small. We're trying to accommodate those that don't have that he said are on these sidewalks. They're trying to get their kids and it's accommodating those with less. That's who this is about.
John, I think of your neighborhood, like, I think of yours, and I think of Valley,
Right.
and all those places that were built in the
Behind
fifties and
Hoover?
sixties
Wow.
with single
Let me,
cars.
it's about time some of the people take accountability. The house next door, 1-car garage, 3 kids, they're home from school, so I'm gonna let them use my driveway, okay? I have a huge driveway, it goes around, it doesn't hurt me. But did we not, a year or two ago, they could call for a permit if the kids are home from school, for 3 months?
It didn't pass.
No,
Council,
that did not pass?
council did not pass.
It was too hard to manage, I think.
Well, it's gonna be
It
hard to
created even
manage
more
anyway.
problems.
Have you ever tried driving down Worsler Avenue? Not in my ward, and all the cars parked on Worsler, I've gotta stop until another one goes. Harmon is the same way, up on the hill, it's probably, we looked at that earlier, it was 20 feet. And down by my house, it's 23
But that's the day, they're allowed to do that
during the day, right?
Yeah,
But at night, it would be disaster.
I have more problems with people, I have a problem more with people parking on the streets during the day than at night. On the
Who's
night,
driving at night?
no one's there, who
Right.
cares?
There's a lot of
Emergency
driving.
And
No, there's
that's
One at a
fine, but
time,
they're-
one at a
They're
time.
not, an emergency vehicle is gonna get around it, and if with less people on the road, they're gonna see it at night with their bright lights, that's a non-issue.
So
literally.
so I will say, a couple of years ago, we had some people that were just down the street, parked their car on the side of the road. And somebody else, maybe young kids not thinking, having enough forethought to think about it, they parked directly opposed that car. Now, a car could go through, maybe even a pickup truck. But here comes the school bus to drop my son off from school, and she sat out there and blared her horn for a couple minutes until somebody came and moved the second car. Now, admittedly, you're not gonna have a school bus going down the street in the middle of the night, at least you shouldn't. What you might have is a fire engine going to a fire, might have
I
an
mean,
ambulance that can't get past.
But to that effect, every event that we have, it happens on Bactal. Every time we have a festival.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, again, to me, that's a non-issue. This was started because of street sweeping, I never knew that.
I didn't either until
I
Randy
mean, that's,
found that.
that's,
I thought it was snow removal.
What do
That's
other,
what I heard.
yeah.
what other communities do? You know, the communities around us, Jackson, Plain, I mean, Canton, we know they park on the street.
That's the big streets.
It depends.
Yeah.
Some you can park, some you can't, some are
Canton, you can park.
neighborhood specific of, some neighborhoods you can, some neighborhoods you can't. To the point several of you are driving at, it is inherently different for different neighborhoods because most people want to park
In the
off
driveway.
the street, right?
Right.
And so in a Monticello, no, it's never gonna be a crowding problem
Mhm.
because most people can park, 4, 5, 6 cars off the street and most people want to park off the street. But in, some of our older, R50 neighborhoods where the lots were laid out before cars were ever a thing, the lot just isn't built for forcing a whole family's worth of cars onto that property. And so it is more likely to make crowded streets. What stands out to me is that, of the 24 hours in the day, 20 of those hours, they can already crowd the street if they want to. There are just 4 hours that we say, no, you can't crowd the street at this time.
Well, and we talk about being a family friendly, we talk about encouraging kids to come home in the summer for their jobs and different things. This is what this would allow, this is what this says, is that we would be family friendly, that we're encouraging this.
But I guess I just go back to 1.5 cars a night. So hopefully kids are still coming home visiting mom and dad now. I guess I just go back to my earlier statement. I don't know that this really feels like it's a solution looking for a problem.
Chief, can I
I'd
get,
really-
I think Christina was the system.
can I get clarification? You said that if we were going to continue not allowing overnight parking, we would need to give you specific instructions for your officers on when permission is granted and when it's not. And I've called and had to get permission a few times. I've never been told no. Are people actually told no?
It becomes contentious in some neighborhoods of this house always calls in for parking. Well, if they're always calling in for parking every single night, so if they just call in for parking, we just grant them parking for the whole year.
So what do you do now? Do you? Or do you not?
We do get to a point where we go, you've called in X number of times already, and it's kind of an arbitrary thing of trying to be a balance of what is fair.
It says they can't.
Yeah.
And then that puts you in a hard position. We don't have anything that says you can't.
It is
Well,
kind of subjective. I mean,
The bigger issue is that we don't have anything that says he can. So council has passed a law that says you may not park on the street. And right now, essentially, we're just saying, if you call and ask nicely, we'll let you break the law.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
much like officer discretion that is exercised with other ORC codes, because the ORC code have been given discretion. That's what we're using, but discretion is subjective to the officer or to the person giving permission. So
So that has,
if dispatch is busy when somebody calls in, what they try to do is they try to look, are there any outstanding parking tickets for this? Because if there are, you get no permission. If there's outstanding parking tickets, that's just flat out right there, you have to be up to date on it. But if they're busy and somebody calls in for permission, maybe they didn't get a chance to look that up. They said, yes, okay. But then the guys know that, well, hey, I know that this car still has tickets outstanding. Why did they give them permission? But they're not gonna write another ticket because dispatch gave them permission. Now there's a little bit of friction inside because, well, why did day shift dispatch give so-and-so permission to park it overnight? They would much rather see it zero tolerance. If you're gonna go, there's no parking on the streets overnight, then flat out, there's no parking on the streets overnight. There is no exception.
no way.
I would recommend, I think, like some sort of permit process. Like, okay, you're going to have a dumpster in your driveway. You need to go to the police department. You need to pay $15 for a permit for up to 15 days or whatever it is. I guess, and I hear what you're saying, Ben, like we allow it 20 hours, but not 4. But the difference is someone can park there for 72 hours. So I live
That's if they
on
get
a
a call.
yeah, if they get a call. So I live, on a small street. And my neighbors across the street just got this huge camper. My other neighbors have a landscaping business with like 1 million big trucks that are already, blocking things during the day. But if they can keep those things parked there for 3 days, I don't love that. But I also don't want to lose my permission to park in the street overnight occasionally when I need to.
So are we allowing RVs and trailers and trucks, giant trucks to park on the street with this? Would that be?
I think
part
we're
of it?
allowed to now,
Because I would say that doesn't make sense.
but they're allowed to.
I mean, I'd rather have that as the exception
Right.
than, you can't have a city where you don't allow people to park. There can't be a zero tolerance. That's the most unfriendly,
That is not
everything we
fair.
stand against, that doesn't make sense. When you talk about like looking around at what other areas do, no one does that. So
Well, I would
that
like to
isn't
hear
something,
So
but
what other
could that
areas
be
do-
an exception? Well, can't let you park anywhere you want.
I mean, I'm not
You know,
striving to be
Plain doesn't
Canton,
do
to be
it, you
honest
know,
with you.
Jackson doesn't do it. Who else do you want to look at?
But I would like to hear what other municipalities
I mean, what sticks out to me is it seems like they're already spending a lot of time enforcing all this stuff. Where they could be patrolling streets to do things that are way more constructive and way more protective of our community. But now we're talking about adding additional stuff. To me, that's crazy. That doesn't make sense. But I mean, Mayor Wilder, you've had some experience in the police department, right? What's your opinion?
I was waiting for that.
Not I don't want to throw you under the bus, but I mean, I just want to hear what you have to say. Experience this.
My experience has been that I think the reason the ordinance was there also was beyond street sweeping. It was one to, keep our streets clear at night for emergency traffic, for our vehicles to be able to get to where they want to go, either through the winter time, through all the seasons. I wrote my share of parking tickets, but I also wrote my share of warnings. I put it on and we have that option, and that's the discretion I think the chief was alluding to, that we do have discretion to do in our jobs. Do we have zero tolerance for stop signs? Do we have zero tolerance for speeding? Do we have zero tolerance for this? No. The officer does have discretion to issue a parking ticket or a written warning or a parking warning. You're right. We do have other things. I think we do. I used it as a tool because I didn't quite have the technologies that we have now with our license plate readers at the time. But when you're checking your neighborhoods, you could write down that license plate, check and see if it comes back to that house, or it's from Akron. Okay, but I'm on Hallam Street. Why is this car parked on Hallam at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning? Or over on Castlewood? And, or did somebody, steal a car and drop it off at, I hate this. So I just think that I'm not sure what the issue was on midnights per se. I haven't been there for 7 years. So if somebody needed overnight parking, 9 times out of 10, the chief was right. We would grant it and say, okay, how many nights do you need it? Well, mom's in the hospital or dad's in the hospital for 3 nights. Okay. We do have issues back in 2020 with everybody was coming home, but you know what? You have to wait. What's going to be best for the families there? Just don't block the traffic. Don't block the driveway. Don't block a fire hydrant. I'm not, I don't want to have to tow some person's car, because they're on vacation or something. I don't know, for 3 days, and they parked their car and their son or daughter left it out there. And, we're giving you 5 days now before we tow a car. Well, how many parking tickets did we have to accumulate before we towed a car, Chief? Do you remember? Was it like, I don't know, 4 or 5?
It was a couple unpaid.
There's a couple unpaid.
2 to 3 unpaid before we get.
And even then, we still tried to contact the person. So, I think it's good that we don't allow parking on the fire hydrant side. To me, that makes sense for the fire department. But I'm trying to picture, on Hallam Street, where I used to live, and if we had 3 or 4 cars there at night, then it is a little narrow over there. And you get back on Westfield and, on the Ambler, those streets are rather narrow to park a car. McKinley is the same way. And so I just always operated, the law was there from 2 to 6. I didn't write a lot of parking tickets, but I wrote a lot of warnings. I was trying to be friendly, let people know. I even put a note on there to call, but maybe not all the police officers operate like I did. Okay, we all operate differently to a certain degree. So if I'm going to answer your question, I don't know. I just kind of rambled, but these are my thoughts that it is an issue because Chief is right. People get burned. I got a $5 parking ticket. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I said, well, you just moved in and I didn't know that. Welcome wagon doesn't exist much anymore, and people don't always call in and your realtor's not always going to tell you, oh, by the way. But then again, at night, I'm thinking Woodrow, what's Woodrow gonna look like if we had, 5 or 6 cars parked along the road? Maybe it's all spaced out, that's fine, but,
Maybe it's not.
so,
We don't know.
so we, you gotta kind of weigh it. Do I want an RV, parked in front of somebody's house because it's a 1-car driveway? I don't know. We have hoarders, okay? We have, well, I'm not gonna say hoarders, but we have garages, I can tell you, just driving around during the daytime. You can see the garages are full. They can't even park their cars here. Yeah, we had a house over on Reeve, or, right, well, anyway, it's off of Portage. 5, 6 cars. They got them all off the road, but as soon as 6 o'clock came around, you saw 2 or 3, parked out there because they knew the law. So how do we weigh this thing? How do we think through this thing? And, take in consideration what the officers are dealing with, and how can we come to some kind of a balance here to help our residents, with their vehicles. Chief is right on, I can't tell you how many times that we didn't cite people for their pickup truck on the sidewalk in their driveway. And you have, not that you had that many people walking their strollers, okay, at nighttime, but even during the daytime, we have some people who park and block the sidewalk, and we get those phone calls. And then you might have with that 1 or 2 residents who doesn't like the neighbor across the street, and as soon as 2 o'clock comes around, hey, this car's parked overtime, you need to give a ticket. Even back then, what we used to do is, on midnights, we would write down the license plates, okay, if we had the time, in our neighborhoods that we checked. And generally, that was after, at least maybe 2:30. Okay, we're not out there writing tickets right at 2 o'clock. But you know what? We would wait until about 5:30 in the morning. And if that car was moved, okay, they didn't get a ticket. But if they came back around and that car was still there, a good chance, you know what? I'm gonna write them a warning, or I'm gonna write them a $5 parking ticket. I don't know what the fine is anymore. I'm an old school guy, okay? But, and then, there's a balance there. You kind of look, and it just, for me, I did it because I knew who lived in that street. I knew whose car it belonged to. And if, again, every police officer does their job a little differently. I was just a little different, and I just wrote him a note and say, hey, please call in next time you need to, you park your car overnight. Now, did I give you any answers? No, but maybe some things to think about. So how do we come to a balancing here and, help the police department out? Because the other thing too is it ties our dispatchers up when they got to come in and pay a $5 fine, okay?
Yeah.
Or, we've had them come in with pennies, okay? Here's my fine. And then they walk away, okay? True story, and, you want your receipt, and they just don't say anything, or tell us to keep our receipt. Okay? But it's, how do we keep our streets clear and clean, and to Jamie's point, attractive yet for people, but again, we're talking about a midnight shift, from 2 to 6. How do we watch our neighborhoods, who belongs there and who doesn't? And again, I think the chief alluded to it. I can remember a couple of crimes we've had where an officer, wrote down a license plate on this street, but we're getting burglarized, 4 streets over. And they're running from the neighborhoods, get back in their car, and they're looting, and off they go. But because we had that car, now you know what? Detectives, let's put this together, okay? Now we can go back.
But you wouldn't see that if you had a whole street full of cars.
Maybe
It's gonna
not,
blend in.
yeah,
Maybe you wouldn't have caught them if you're
Maybe.
a ticket.
maybe not.
So
So maybe it warrants a little bit more discussion, but,
How do you do
Oh.
speeding?
so.
You know, with cars speeding, so do they all get tickets like 8, you're great, 9, you're mine, over your speeding? Do they give if it's a school zone, and they're going 25 and they're 20, do they get a ticket?
It's officer discretion, and I cannot tell you what every officer does. Okay. And just to correct you, it was 9-year fine, 10-year fine was the old.
And that's every Sunday, they write everyone.
John, any of you, if you take discretion away from a police officer, you're gonna have issues.
Well, I want
Okay.
to have this.
All right, we're out there to do a fair job for our public, okay? I'm not scolding you, I'm just saying, you touched the point here, okay?
Yeah.
And you got,
Our policy was, we are good to back every one of our officers was writing a ticket at 12. Now, in a school zone, it is a much tighter tolerance in a school zone,
totally different than
much
two
tighter
of the
tolerance.
six.
For example, if you're going down Maple and you're doing 35 and you totally missed it, it's a school zone and it's supposed to be 20, you're getting a ticket.
Yeah.
It's flat out, there's no discretion on that, you're gonna get a ticket for that because you went through a school zone. Same thing on Main Street when you're going through that school zone. That's the biggest thing, is people aren't paying attention to what time it is and they're just going, traveling as they normally would. So they're,
I see your stuff.
each officer has their own threshold. What I tell the officers is be consistent with what you do. And that is where the inconsistency comes up in the question of giving people permission because they call us ahead of time for parking overnight. Again, going back to the ones that call in every week for week after week after week for permission to park overnight. Is that really what our intent is for them? Because in that sense, yeah, I could say, somebody in the household works out of town during the week. On the weekends, they come home. So every weekend they're home, every weekend they have more cars than what they can get in the driveway. So every weekend they're calling us for parking permission.
Acceptable. It
That's
should,
acceptable?
yeah.
Okay.
Like, I feel like that's okay. That's what I'm saying, is why are we wasting your time with that? Why are we wasting
Well,
our residents' time? Everybody's
They have to
busy.
feel the cost still, is what he's
But
saying.
what I'm
That's what I'm saying, though. We're wasting people's time.
I agree, right.
And then here we have that person that's like, Friday night, they travel all day, and they have to come home and wait, or get disconnected with dispatch, or do this, and it's
Yeah, I think we're
unnecessary.
I think we're talking the same thing, but I was asking, under our current conditions, they call every weekend and ask for permission. So is it really a rule for them that they can't park on the street because they call every weekend and get permission to park on the street? So it isn't consistent.
How many people do you, in a week's time, how many people call asking to park on the street?
We, at any one given point in time, we probably have 6 to 10 on the list for parking permission.
For a week?
Yeah.
Okay. And I again go back to 1.5 parking tickets a night for 6 in a week. And that is causing us to change a long-standing ordinance for a city of 17,000 people. I mean, we have what,
That's for
6,
street
7,000? We have 6, 7,000 housing units in the city, correct?
Mhm.
So out of 7,000 housing units, we have maybe 6 people in a given week. I would like to see if maybe there's, to the point of, I think kind of what you were driving at earlier, could we maybe before we repeal this, because it clearly seems to be the direction you two are interested in going, before we go that direction, could we, what do you say?
We're only 2 votes.
Could we look at maybe some sort of, or revamping the permit idea that was brought up a couple years ago? Maybe that's the better way to go.
Or I just like your exception idea. Like, you're not gonna park your RV, you're not gonna park your boat, you're not gonna
But
park.
see, I don't even know that I like just randomly parking vehicles. I mean,
But they're not randomly doing it, like you said. If you have the ability, you
Maybe.
want to be in your car, in your garage, you want to be in your driveway. People are not just randomly doing that unless it's such an inconvenience or they don't have the opportunity to park the car like that.
I just got a call from a resident, actually, I can't say just, it was a couple weeks ago, about a vehicle in somebody's driveway that was rusting in its place. Now, I know there's a 72-hour thing, and I guess if they're calling about it being in their neighbor's driveway, they're gonna call about it
Yeah.
being in the street. But mark my words, we're gonna get to that point where we have cars lingering in the streets. I think it's gonna open up a can of worms. That's just my thought. I genuinely wanna hear from the
I think-
constituents in Ward 1. I hope they come to a council meeting.
I think we have an ordinance about junk vehicles.
Yeah.
We do.
We do,
Yeah,
but people are still doing it.
Yeah.
People still have junk vehicles. You're absolutely right.
We should
But we
decide.
do go out.
You know, the other thing too is, when it came around the holidays, we give a lot of grace because of, once Thanksgiving, I'd be the first one as a supervisor on shift. I said, guys,
Right.
or officers, only if it's necessary, okay? If they're blocking a driveway or fire hydrant, then get out of your car and go up and tell them to move the car, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, before you issue a ticket. Just make sure they're sober when they come out. But we give allowances to, some of those major holidays and
Well,
it
to
didn't
that
seem to
point,
be a problem, so I don't know.
to your point, Mayor, could we look at carving out things out around the major holidays, July 4th, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever, that, okay, people might be home, I mean, I just,
How you gonna let them know?
Or you just get the permit.
or you get a permit.
I don't know, I've never been given grace or anyone who's accidentally left
You
their
didn't
car out.
Christie,
On
you should've-
I have paid parking tickets in
Yeah.
town for my kids. so
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am amongst everybody
Yeah.
else that
Me too.
has been affected by it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just seems like, and Jamie, I guess I don't like,
It sounds newsworthy there, Frank.
I like thinking of ways that we can be more proactive and think, okay, well, these are the times, this is what's different than when this ordinance was made,
Right.
so many years ago. So when you
Yeah.
say that, like, we're always changing things for the way things are done. That's what we constantly do up here. That's why our ordinances are constantly changing. That's why we're hiring different people. That's why the newsletter's printed differently. I mean, that's why the fire station is getting redone.
Yes,
Because it was so long ago and it's not accommodating what we need.
right.
So I don't want to use that excuse like, well, it's not broke. I do think it is broke in many situations with people that call in the waste of time. But I think there's ways that we can accommodate what you're saying as well,
Okay.
as far as, yeah, Christina, I know that there is that RV that is almost housed beside you, and Mr. Osborne used to come and complain about that, and like the mayor said, we do have rules about that, and we try to accommodate, those situations. So I feel like we could do the same thing with that, because that's not our intent, is to put people's boats there or their RVs for the weekend, but it is to allow those homeowners that are fortunate to have the larger homes with the double driveways, with the double, that don't have basements, that don't flood or whatever, to allow them the ease and convenience of moving cars or their family, allowing people to get to work, working the night shift, coming home, not waking up dad, whatever it is, we want to make that as easy as possible on our families.
And I agree, and again, like I said, I want to hear from residents of Ward 1 specifically, but I guess I just am concerned.
Does it become a junkyard?
Does this junk, it becomes
Sure.
a junkyard, this is gonna junk up the streets? And again, I know I'm going off on a limb here, does this junk up the streets? Does this hurt the housing values of everybody's home in the city as we have junk cars in the street? And again, I know I'm going to extremes, but I would like to explore the permit option before we go to completely pulling this. That's just my own thoughts.
And what would
I
you want for the permit?
Yeah, that's just gonna put more work on what they're doing anyway.
That's what we tried before.
Yeah, and that failed.
That's what we talked
We
about
talked
before.
about,
We
I don't
never
even,
tried
actually,
it.
I said it failed. I don't even know if we brought it to a vote. Did we bring it to a vote? Do you recall, Ben?
We
Believe
we
tabled
did,
I-
and it was defeated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chief, can I ask you a question? It's a little bit in a different direction. If we go down this path, parking is allowed, will it change the officer on night shifts patrolling in any way? Do you think that they might just be less apt to be traveling down the residential roads that are covered at night adds to, bad actors to be hidden?
So they're still gonna. The sergeants are still accountable to make sure that their officers are patrolling. We have GPS to be able to see that there is some variedness in their patterns. We don't double check the night tediously that they were on this road and that road. We just make sure that the spots show up staggered on the tracking sheet, that we know they're in different locations. There's just not sitting in this one lot all night long. No, to the thing of, some of the burglary suspects that we had overnight, car break-ins and stuff like that. Usually when my guys get tips, they get put into the computer system, and we get hits when those cars come back into town. as soon as we get a suspect vehicle, we've got police and stuff to identify either from intel from our community or intel from another community of potential suspects. And our neighbors and our residents do a really good job telling us, hey, there was a car parked here that was, it was out of norm, they give the road get a description to it, we go back to the computer, my guys are real good, they check the description of the vehicle, they come up, but they, is this what it looked like? Yeah, that's what it looked like. I laid off of it, with the police system, and when that car shows up in town, we get hit.
And if we have a bunch of
Notification, and my guys then start driving around trying to find that car and follow them. True story.
And I understand that. It's important that, you know, at nighttime when staffing is at the levels that it is, that they are omnipresent. And the fact that cars are everywhere. So we must have 10 different police officers on duty at night because the cars are everywhere. I was just concerned that maybe, well, if we're not checking for parking, it doesn't force us to go down all the residential streets. And I'd hate to see that happen.
Conscientious.
Would you want-
Conscientious, they take pride in the fact that their slogan they tout to me is, to an extent, they're in the business of putting themselves out of business. If there's no traffic coming into town and moving around, because there's too many cops in town, we're gonna go someplace else and do something, then they've done a good job. And the way that we see that is we see that by a reduced number of calls in the morning, that our day shift isn't getting a whole bunch of car break-in calls in the morning. Because night shift was out there actively patrolling. They just maybe didn't have a whole lot of stuff, cars to stop and interact with.
Right. And that's what happens now, which is awesome. I don't want to lose that.
Would you just consider maybe a grace period or something to try this out? Whether it's just, you know, just
Well, and that has
just
been
the
too.
You know,
fire hydrant side or something?
I think there can be a compromise, like, you know, if we don't like the 72, maybe there's 48 hour or something like that. But, you know, to the point of larger vehicles like RVs
Yeah, we can't.
that are blocking
We can't.
that far, that you can't, that's gotta be eliminated, that can't be part of this.
But-
But the smaller lots that have, there's a lot of families that we could be helping on
Yeah.
this. I mean, if we wanna be citizen friendly, this is a heck of a step to do that. Instead of, hey, because of an ordinance passed in X for street sweeping from 2 to 6, you have to move your car, wake up your dad on the third shift and have him, I mean, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense.
What about a street by street basis?
Maybe there's
We're gonna have
districts,
to-
that's what I'm saying, there's a compromise. It's,
But
to me,
what
it's
would that
ignorant
mean,
to
though?
to
That's still
say
gonna
no.
not help the smaller homes.
Well, okay, so let's say you live on a street with a smaller home and you want it. Come to the city, we'll help you facilitate conversing with your neighbors and the neighbors can decide.
No, then we're putting neighbors against each other, and you have the whole, even maybe one retiree that's like, no, I don't like your kids, I saw them spit something, no, like, I don't want neighbor confrontation.
Here's what I think we're not, I'm sorry, do you wanna go first? Okay.
I was just raising my hand to get.
Okay. What I think we're maybe not considering, at least I don't think so, is, so again, my neighbor across the street bought this huge camper, bought a huge truck to pull it. I don't know where. Got some money, bought some things. The camper does not live at the house. It's clearly kept in storage somewhere. The truck does live at the house. If we allow this, the truck is going to be parked. Why would it not be parked in the street just all the time then? He's going to drive it to work each day, but it's going to be there. Like, that's going to be an extension of their driveway permanently, and the camper is going to move into the driveway. So it's not like in your neighborhood, it's occasional, but in mine, it's going to be
Mhm.
people using the street as
That's parking.
a parking lot. And I don't know that that's terrible,
Yeah.
but it sure changes my street. You know,
Yeah.
it really changes it.
And I contend, could it affect your property values of your homes? If it, I don't know, just something I'm bringing up. Listen, I'm a car guy. There's cars on the short list I'd love to get someday. Well, now, knowing I can line up my street with cars, I just gotta shuffle them around every 72 hours. I mean, it sounds crazy. I know I sound like I'm
It
crazy
is
right
crazy.
now. Thanks. But this could be the reality of what we face, so. I don't know.
Well, and maybe in that situation, there's a per car house limit or something like that. You know, so in that rare instance, you aren't gonna be able to, or if you're touring so many cars and that's your side hustle and you have 15 cars lined up. I don't know why we always look at the worst case scenario as opposed to how we can help those that are truly every single day bothered by this.
So
And you're right, I have a neighbor across my street. His RV is parked. I see him bring it in now all the time. It does sit there. It's sitting in his driveway. He's fortunate other cars go in and that's annoying. But I know too that, Ben, do we have something that says that the RV cannot sit there for X amount of days? I thought we always had that in Christina.
On private property or on the street?
I was on private property. Yep.
If it's legally parked on your private property, you may
You could
leave
keep
it there
it, yes.
forever.
And that should be. It's your private property.
They can't use the sewer, though.
Right,
Right.
right.
For the record, I'm looking at the worst case scenario, just because this is what realistically could happen, and I fear if we go down this path, it'll be tough to rein it back in. That's why I'm looking at the worst case scenario, so.
Can we do it on a trial basis? I mean, is that up for discussion?
I guess.
We can't communicate
Yeah,
anything to our people
No.
very effectively, so
Well, I mean,
communicating that.
I think on the trial basis, it would be more for the police benefit and how it's working that way.
I think I'm more,
Take the trial away, now you got people upset.
yes, I think I would like to hear people come in and share
But
their
they
thoughts
don't
and views.
come
at
in.
council.
I know you keep saying that.
Well,
That's how are you
send
gonna
an
let
email.
Ward 1? What are you gonna do?
I'm sorry?
How are you gonna say Ward 1 if you have any of these issues? You know that people don't come in. They come in for deer and cats. They do not come in here for that, this Jamie. And how are we gonna let them know we're talking about it? They're not listening. They're not seeing it. Yes.
I will say that we are very short window into this survey. And already there are quite a few people who have written their free-form survey responses about this issue before even tonight occurred, right? I suspect that if we were to set a public hearing for this issue, that our dear friend, Mr. Wang here, would probably report that in his newspaper. And of course, we would, share that on all of our things, and I suspect you might be surprised how much this issue brings people out.
Well, let's wait till the survey's all complete and then.
Let's just set a public hearing.
Yeah.
Well, to be clear, it's not a question on the survey, it is just in the comments
And
at
what are
the
they
end,
saying?
Yeah.
both sides of, I was reading them this morning, that's why I know, one gentleman was complaining about somebody on his street, parks on the street all the time and never
Yeah.
seems to get a ticket, and somebody else was complaining, I have actively told my friends not to move here because of the stupid overnight parking rule.
Yes.
How about we do this? So what's our meeting? Liam, can you pull up our meeting calendar here coming up?
So we will have, the next one would be June 2nd, then June 9th. June 2nd will be a committee. And June 9th will be the next council meeting.
What if we held a public hearing before one of those? Can we do it on June 2nd? We've got 2 weeks before then. We can notify the public, get good feedback, and hear what they have to say.
Because you commented about how a lot of the kids were coming up from college
Yeah.
and this could help a lot of the parents
Yeah.
not create some issues and so kind of getting it done sooner than later.
So
That's the direction.
what do you guys think about that? Amending the
That's fine.
calendar to add the public hearing and let's let everybody talk about it. I mean, we don't do that enough anyway. This impacts every ward. Why
Yeah.
would we not do that?
Mhm.
You guys okay with that?
We have it on this, what is it, the 9th?
Second.
Second.
Not enough time. You got a holiday, and by the time we get, I think the
He's
9th.
gonna report about it. Where else are they finding
Yeah.
out?
Another week of.
If they care about this,
Do it. Yeah.
Is he gonna report about it?
We don't-
I don't think it's enough time. The 9th would be. Because that gives us 3 weeks. By the time we get it, it's 2.5 weeks. That's before the
I mean, that's fine. If you think more people are gonna talk about it in that time period.
I think you're gonna have those ones come.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna matter the time.
I don't think it's.
So we already have a public hearing on
Yeah,
the
June
9th.
9th, you'll already have another public hearing.
Well, then.
I mean, you can just
double
add
that.
it.
I was gonna say, why can't we just add it?
Let's do that. Can we amend, we'll, well, we won't amend it now, there's nothing to talk about on that. What if we establish that as a public hearing? We'll vote to have a public hearing for it on
If you would like to amend the June 9th public hearing to
Yeah.
include this as well.
And do we need to vote on that now?
Yeah, that would be.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to add a public hearing about this discussion on June 9th.
I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay. Do you want to continue discussion on this now? I just want to get that.
No.
Any other thoughts?
Chief, if you were saying, see, we then kind of proposed you had option A or B to say, okay, hey, the right side of the street, all city streets, no one can park on, you know, would you go street by street and be more specific to say, what would you prefer?
I would look at the right of way, what I got from Rob was 50-foot right of way on a street, according to the plat. Gives us 30 feet curb to curb. 40-foot right of way gives us 24 feet curb to curb. I'm looking at those 40-foot right of way streets, of course, narrow enough that those are the streets we should consider limiting parking
On one side,
on one side.
and you would say the others
I
are,
would say,
okay,
to give my brother at the fire department, the easiest access to the hydrant is the fire hydrant side, is the most notable side of the street to not park on.
okay.
That would be one thing to consider in those types of neighborhoods where those streets are that narrow.
Okay,
And then would that be signs in people's yards then? No parking?
not their yards,
Well, there'd be no
it
parking.
would be on the street where they are now, it
If
says
you're
slow
going-
down.
If you're going to post signs, it would be posted.
Yeah,
If you're going to roll it out without signs, then we would take as the mayor said, a discretionary approach to that side of the street, educating the people that are there. That would be issuing warnings to teach them a new habit that you can't park on the side of the street, you gotta park on the other side of the street. Our overnight parking ordinance is only on the signs coming into the city. So when you drive into the city, the sign is, close somewhere along the road, side of the roadway where it says, welcome to North Canton, by the way, you just passed the sign that says restricted parking between this time and this time in the middle of the night. And it's also was on your utility bills at one point.
I know my friend,
I paid close attention to that.
right. Another one, she called, she had a sleepover for her friends, it was a last minute thing, 5 girls spent the night, she got 5 tickets. And, she's like, how am I gonna take to the 16-year-old kids, like, we each get tickets, so she paid them, but she's like, I didn't know this was a thing, I didn't see the sign as you pass it. I mean, again, it is that awareness, and John, you would say maybe take some accountability, it is a different city aspect, and if you're coming from other areas, this is not normal.
We do have door hangers, welcome to the community, that kind of point out some of those unique aspects of our community. Should be parking in your yard. You know, a parking restriction.
Yeah, I wish everybody read everything that they were doing, they don't.
Door handle hangers that we endorse because we get a list. Every time somebody signs up for our water and rubbish, take away that they, we put the door hanger on the door.
if we move forward with this, what are the thoughts then on returning to zero tolerance for parking in the yards and parking over top of sidewalks then? Because seriously, if
Well, I think
this
they,
is opened up to allow parking on the streets, then there should be zero excuse
well, I
for.
think
I
they'd
agree.
be- I think they would be excited to have their yard back. I don't think they'd wanna park in their yard.
I don't know.
Are there any side streets with hydrants on both sides?
I,
I can say in town, we have some anomaly streets where normally it's north and west, normally. But we do have some peculiar streets where it is on both sides, it's staggered down the street, not right across from each other, but for whatever reason, the way the water line went, it jumps to another side of the street.
Gotcha, yeah.
So that is, the neat thing would be, the clean thing to do would be to say, they're parking on the north and the west sides of the street, but we can't say that. Because it's not guaranteed that that's where the park.
Right.
I think it would be very rare to have hydrants on both sides. The only one that comes to mind is the backside of Hoover that we just vacated has private hydrants on one side and public hydrants on the other. So I don't wanna say it doesn't exist anywhere else in the city, but it would be very strange for us to have two water mains on the same
Yeah.
street.
I think. Right. All right, anything else?
I just want to mention, I'm not in favor of adding a bunch of no parking signs to the city and the community. I think we're overstimulated with signs as it began, and I don't think we need any more.
And what does 50 miles worth of no parking signs run?
We just won't do it.
But how do we let them know that?
That becomes the
You
problem.
take down the sign at the entrance to the city that nobody sees anyway.
True.
Right, I
True.
mean, come on.
I mean, in those cities that you have, a lot of parking issues, you do see signs. I mean, if you're in Chicago, if you're in Cleveland, you better look at those signs.
We're gonna expect people to
And it's-
adhere to this law. And we're not gonna tell them which side of the street they can park on. Oops, sorry, you chose the wrong one tonight, so you get a ticket.
Well, so there's already,
You mean to tell me I can't park in front of my house? I have to park across the street in front of
well,
you?
there you
We're
go.
already saying that you
We're
can't
already
park on the street
we've already
between
told
2 and 6
Right.
because of street sweepers.
Oh.
So, like, it's kind of,
1.5 and up, it seems to
Exactly.
be working,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I am genuinely curious to hear what people say on the
Yeah.
ninth. So like I said, it's been very split from people when we talked about it in the past, but. See what they have to say.
okay. Thank you, Frank, appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor, everybody. Anything else? I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.